Today is the 27th day of the counting of the Omer. Today is the 27th day of the counting of the Omer. Started last night. So we're more than halfway to Shavuot. And during the counting of the Omer, during those 50 days, those 7 weeks to Shavuot, from first fruits to first fruits. The name of the festival that we start to count on is called First Fruits, and then the Bible calls the next festival Shavuot, First Fruits also. So the count goes from First Fruits to First Fruits, from Bikurim to Bikurim in Hebrew. And during those 7 weeks, there's this big body of knowledge, of understanding that God gives us, and it's about our gifts. Every single believer has one of the gifts. Now, I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the gifts. We're going to talk about where this comes from. We're going to talk about, actually, we're going to crack a code. We're going to crack a code. I love when that happens. We're going to crack a code today. So, let's go to Ephesians chapter 4. And we're going to read the end of the story, and then we're going to go back to the beginning of the story. But the end of the story people are more familiar with. They're not familiar with the beginning of the story. So let's start here with what we're familiar with, at least we think we're familiar with. Ephesians chapter 4. Now, on the screen, I have highlighted, emboldened, and italicized, and enlarged the font of the words that we're going to key in on. The word measure, and then ascended, descended. These are the main words that we're going to key in on. And I'm going to weave these two concepts together to show you why these two concepts are in this passage in the first place. So let's go to Ephesians 4, 7 through 13. But to each one of us, there's the first thing. To every single believer. And this is what most believers just don't know or just don't believe. That to every single believer, something here applies. Every single believer, to each of us. It's written in English. Grace was given according to the measure of Messiah's gift. We're going to talk about more about the Greek of that phrasing and make a little more sense of it. But to each of us, grace was given according to the measure of Messiah's gift. That's why it says. Now, when I read this in the past, I kind of glossed over it. I was like, therefore it says, I just kind of glossed over it. I was waiting to get to the next part that was really going to teach me what I was looking for. This is the first year where I finally cracked the code. I finally figured out why this is here. It's not in my book. Because I never knew it before. Therefore, that's why it says, when he ascended on high, he led captive a host of captives, and he gave gifts to men, to people. Now, this expression, he ascended, what does it mean except that he also descended into the lower parts of the earth? He who descended is himself also he who ascended far above all the heavens. So that I was reading this, and my eyes would gloss over, and I would be like, I don't really know why that's there. And Paul is just kind of talking. I don't know what he's saying. Get back to the subject. Get back to what I want to know. Get back to what you're talking about. Because I knew what he was talking about. He was talking about counting of the Omer. And I was looking to understand counting of the Omer. So I was like, get past this ascended, descended stuff, and get back to the message at hand. He who descended is himself also he who ascended far above the heavens, so that he might fill everything. And he gave some as apostles. Now, the sum is out of the entire group of believers, because he said, but to each one of us, grace was given according to the measure of Messiah's gift. So, this applies to every single believer. And from that entire pool of believers, some of them apostles, some of them prophets, some of them evangelists, some pastors, and some teachers. Well, it doesn't say some teachers, it's just assumed. some as pastors and teachers. Now, Christians have read this for 2,000 years, and they don't know the concept from which it is coming. And so there's lots and lots of different ideas and teachings and doctrines about this. But if we can restore it back to its original idea, then it will really, really make sense. And it's the counting of the Omer. That's the original idea, which I'll show you. 4, the equipping of the holy ones for the work of service to the building up of the body of Messiah, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, to a mature man, to the measure, there's that word again, to the measure of the stature which belongs to the fullness of Messiah. Now this word fullness, goes with measure. I don't know much about English. You got like verbs and modifying adjectives and stuff like that. I don't know the words. But the word fullness is attached to the word measure. This is on purpose, because there are 2 titles of this time period. There's counting of the Omer, and does anybody know the other title? Very good. I mean, filling of the measure. That's what this time period is called in Hebrew. Filling of the measure. For these 50 days from first fruits to first fruits, every day is a filling of the measure. So that's what we're going to talk about to put this back into its original context. So here's the 2 concepts we're going to work on. We're going to find out about. Number 1, what is the ascent and descent? And number 2, number 1 is what is the measure? Number 2 is what is the ascent and descent? And then what do they have to do with each other? Why are both of these concepts crammed together into this verse, this passage in Ephesians? So, remember, if Shaul is teaching, what's he teaching from? The Torah. Because that's all there was to teach from. So where in the Torah, where in the Bible, does it link ascending and descending with measure, with the measure? That was my question. This is the first year I've even thought about this. Maybe. This is the first year I've ever thought about it. So this week, we did last week, I put together the art show for the final, the end of the year for the kids in school. It's a lot of work, and I twisted my ankle, I had an injury, and it was hard. It was really, really, really tough. But I got it done, and we won. We won everything. We won, and we won, and we won, and we won. And we upped the ante for the other art departments in the other schools because of the great work that I got out of the kids. So I didn't have time to study. I had no time to even think. And in the morning I read this passage in Ephesians, and I was like, oh, again with the ascending and descending, come on, get on with it. And then I went, maybe I should read it. So I stopped and I went, okay, I'll read it. I ain't going to do anything, but I'll read it. When he ascended on high, he led captive a host of captives and he gave gifts to men. Now, this expression, when he ascended, what does it mean? But he also descended in the lower parts of the earth. He who descended is himself, those who ascended far above the heavens, so he mindful of all things. And then I went on, and I drove to school, and it hit me. I got it. I got the whole teaching. I got the whole concept. The whole thing just kind of went pop, 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 in order, and I saw the whole teaching. And it happened in about 30 seconds. I understood immediately why ascended and descended is in this passage. So that's what I'm going to show you. This is quite exciting for me because I've been doing this for 30 years. And I've been avoiding the passage for 30 years because I didn't understand it. Which is kind of good because people would ask me, I go, I don't know. Which is a whole lot better than me saying something stupid. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I hope. Okay, so the question is, number 1, what is the measure? Now the measure is back in Leviticus 23. This is the Torah portion for this week. It's called Emor. Let's go to Leviticus 23. Let's go there. This is in the middle of the Torah portion, actually toward the end. And the name of the Torah portion is Emor, which means to speak. Say, like say, talk, say. That's all it means. Emor, talk, say. So I'm like, that doesn't mean nothing. But this has Leviticus 23 in it, which is the big one. This is what all the Christians and the Messianic Jews and the Hebrew Christians are all, hyped up about Leviticus 23, about the festivals. And they should be, because this is the foundation of the entire cycle of the year. And in this cycle of the year, Leviticus 23, 10 through 11, it says, when you enter the land which I'm going to give you and reap its harvest, then you shall bring in the sheaf. Now it's translated as sheaf. It is not sheaf. It's Omer. Omer. These 50 days are called the counting of the Omer. That means 1 Omer per day. Yes? Yes. 1 Omer per day. Counting of the Omer. It's not a sheaf, but it's a sheaf. And here it is. This is a woman. Men and women both harvest the sheaf of wheat, or the Omer of wheat. This is, not wheat, barley. This is barley, and the day after the Hag Matzah, starts, Passover starts, they go out and they harvest 1 Omer of wheat. So what they do is they tie them up in bundles the day before, and then they go out with a scythe and they ask 3 questions. Not going to go into that. And after the questions are answered yes, then they harvest the barley. Now, over time, over those 50 days, it goes from barley to wheat. Barley for the first 25 days or so, and then the second 25 days or so is wheat. So, what are we in now? Are we in barley or wheat? What day of the counting of the Omer did I say it is?
28, right?
27. So, we're in wheat now.
Pretty close to change.
So, it has now gone from barley to wheat. We're in the second half of the counting of the Omer. But it's still done the same way every single day. Priests go out there, and yes, there are women priests. Don't think they're all men.
What?
Yes, there's women priests. And the priest goes out and they cut the barley. Now, they didn't minister in the temple as much as the men did because they were at home doing what priests' homes do. They got to take care of the home. So it's harvested, and it says, when you enter the land which I'm going to give you, and you reap its harvest, then you shall bring in the Omer of the first fruits of your harvest to the Kohen, the priest. He shall wave the Omer before the Lord, for you to be accepted. On the day after the Shabbat, the priest shall wave it. Now this word, wave, is the answer to everything that I avoided for 30 years. Wave. It's Tenufah. In my big book, I had a big mistake. Because in the Counting of the Omer chapter, on the very beginning of the Counting of the Omer chapter, I say the word is, an offering given to the priest, which is, you should know what that's called. What's it called? Everything you give to the priest, you wave it. Say it again. Terumah. So I put terumah. It's not terumah. It's tenufah. Say tenufah. Tenufah. Now, it comes from the root nuf, which means to wave, which we'll talk about. So, he shall tenuf the Omer before the Lord for you to be accepted. On the day after the Shabbat, the priest shall tenuf it. He shall tenuf it. He shall wave it. You shall also count for you, or to you, personally, from the day after the Sabbath, from the day when you brought in the Omer of the Tenufah, there shall be 7 perfect Sabbaths. 7 perfect Sabbaths. You shall count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. Then you shall present a new grain offering to the Lord. Now, I have never studied the vessels and the amounts and all that of the Omer. I read about it, but I never saw pictures or anything like that. The reason was the priests didn't have any yet until recently. But now in the Temple Institute, they've got all the amounts, they've got all the vessels, they've got everything created for the processes the Bible says to do. So here's the reaping. Here's the scythe. Can you see the scythe?
Yeah.
And she's got a scythe too. And that's what the reaping is done with. This is an ephah, which is 10 Omer. This is an Omer. This is a big jar, like a big mason jar, oversized mason jar. This is a regular sized mason jar. It's a log of oil. These are the ingredients or the amounts that are offered for the offering. So an ephah is 10 Omer. And Omer is 1 day. 1 Omer per day, yes?
Yeah.
So how many days does an ephah represent? 10 days. So you have 50 days of the counting of the Omer. 50 Omers, right?
Yeah.
5 ephah.
Right.
Make sense?
Yes.
Did I go like that?
Yeah.
Sorry. 5. I'm not all here. 5 ephah. Yeah, thanks a lot. No. 10 Omers equals an ephah. You have 50 days, so how many ephah?
5.
5 ephah.
Each one is 10.
How many Omers for those 50 days? How many Omers for the 50 days?
10.
Omer.
50.
Counting of the Omer.
50, 1 a day.
50, 1 a day. How many ephah for the 50 days?
5.
5. Okay. Now, however you want it. In the Bible, it's EPHAH, which is awful, but whatever.
That many.
This is how they spell it in the Bible, which is ridiculous. It's ephah, not ephah.
And that's the
Ephah.
measure.
That's the measure. This is the 10 Omer measure. That's not the measure, that's a measure. Now, an Omer is about a half a gallon, or 4 pints, or 2 quarts. That's this one, right? And an ephah is 10 Omers. Okay, so now you're starting to get just a little tiny taste of biblical measurements. Biblical measurements. But the specific measure that we're talking about is the Omer.
Right.
When you enter the land which I'm going to give you and reap its harvest, then you shall bring in the Omer of the first fruits of the harvest to your priest. He shall tenuf the Omer before the Lord for you to be accepted. On the day after the Sabbath, the priest shall tenuf it, shall wave it. Now, this is a trippy vessel. It's a 3-tier vessel. This is how the Omer was done. I didn't know this until this year because it just produced this recently. The priest just produced this recently, and it's in the Temple Institute. It has this top one. That's big. It's a big vessel that holds an ephah. Down here is where you put the fire to roast, which we'll talk about, to roast the grain. Here's a sieve that sits on top of the big one, through which you put the grain, which we'll talk about also. So it's a 3-tiered process to create this Omer offering. This is a regular vessel for the meal offerings that was used every single day. So in order to get this ephah or Omers up to the altar, it's carried in this. Pretty, right? They just recently created these. So now we know the vessels that these were done with. Yes. Those are made out of copper or bronze. It's strange, the word nachash in Hebrew, it could be bronze or copper. They decided to use copper. In the temples too, everything's made out of copper. All right. Now, the 2 titles for this time period, these 50 days from first fruits to first fruits, time period is called filling the measure. And what's the other one?
Counting the Omer.
Counting the Omer. 50 days you count the Omer, and 50 days you fill the measure. Now, this is a title that comes from Judaism. It comes from the Midrash. From the Mishnah. So I've got the passage in the Mishnah that actually tells how this was done. I love this passage in the Mishnah because it's so clear. That's talking about the Omer. How was the Omer done? First, they reaped it, and they put it into baskets and brought it to the temple court. The sages say they used to thresh it with reeds and stalks of plants so that the grains should not be crushed. And then they put the grains in a copper tube. The tube was perforated so that the fire should prevail throughout all the grains. Now, because it says tube, I thought, like a tube, like a cylinder, but it's not.
Like what they roast chili in.
Right, like what they roast chili in. That's what I thought, but it's not. It's this setup here.
Huh. That's different.
The tube, the vessel was perforated so that the fire should prevail throughout the grains. They spread it out in the temple court and let the wind blow over it. What that means is they throw it up in the air with a shovel. And the wind would blow away the chaff and the good grain would drop. That's called winnowing.
Called farming.
Then they put it in a grist mill and removed from it 1/10 of an ephah. How much is 1/10 of an ephah?
Omer.
An omer. So they did all this with the ephah. The measure that they're working with is an ephah. And then they remove the measure, the new measure, which is an omer. And that's what they go offer to God, which was sifted through 13 sieves. And that's what they would offer as the menachot, the bread offering. All right. So there's 5 processes here. It's reaped. Yes?
Yep.
That's the scythe. The priests go out, they cut it down. And then it's brought to the temple court, and they beat it with, now this is weird. Threshing is not done gently. Threshing is done with big, huge wooden threshing sledges pulled by oxen with nails embedded in the bottom to crush and separate the grain from the chaff. And it's a violent, horrible process. Like if it was a little people, it's horrible. But in the temple court, it was done differently. It was done with canes so that it wouldn't destroy the grains. Stalks of plants and reeds so that the grains should not be crushed. And then they put the grains in the copper or the copper vessel, and the vessel was perforated, so fire should roast each grain. Had to touch every single grain. So what do we got so far? We got reaping, we got threshing, which is beating it in the temple court, and then we have
Sifting.
parching, burning, cooking it. And then they spread it out in the temple court, and the wind would blow over it. What is that? Winnowing. So they get a winnowing fork and they throw it up in the air in the temple court, and the good grain would drop and the bad chaff would blow away. Yes?
Yes.
And then they would take 1/10 of it, an omer, and they would sift it through 13 sieves. Now what that means is the sieves get tighter and tighter and tighter. This is only one. There's 13 of them. And they just get tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter until they have one omer, which they put in this vessel, take it up to the altar. Got it?
Yeah.
How many processes are there?
Okay.
5. Okay.
I see that.
All right.
5 years.
Right. Okay, so my question is, what is the measure? Filling the measure is done every day by 5 processes. What's the measure? What's the measure? 1 omer. That's the measure. 1 omer per day is the measure.
Omer is the measure.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, so each day to fill the measure, 5 processes are done to create this one. It's pretty small, like a mason jar, like an oversized mason jar of grain. That grain is then sifted, it's perfect flour. Now I know this that when they get the perfect flour, the gizbar, which is the treasurer of the temple, would stick his hand into the flour and pull his hand out, and if no flour stuck to his hand, that means it was perfect. So that's why I went through 13 sieves. it would get finer and finer and finer and finer. Perfect grain. And perfect flour. All right. So there's 5 processes to create the measure. What are the 2 titles of this day? Filling the measure and counting the Omer. All right. So that's the measure. Now, what is the ascent and descent?
That right there.
It's the Tenufah. It's the Tenufah. It's the Tenufah. That's the ascent and descent. Because remember, God said, get that Omer and tenuf it. Tenuf it. That's the Tenufah. I want you to tenuf it. Make it a tenuf. So, if you can figure out what tenuf is, that will give you your ascent and descent. Now, tenufah is translated as wave offering. It's from the root nuf, which means to wave up and, not wave like this, not like flags.
No.
Wave up and down is what it means. Up and down. And it literally is up and down, nuf. Terumah is translated as a heave offering, and that's also up, but it's not down. To heave it up. So, terumah comes from rum or ram, up high, but tenuf is different. Tenuf is both directions. It's up and down and up and down. So the way that the Omer was done, look at the vessel I had in the illustration. The Omer vessel's wrong. See, that's what I knew back then. That's what I thought back then. I was wrong. What vessel is it? What's the vessel that they're going to tenuf?
The Omer.
The little dish with the cover?
Right, the dish with the cover, this one.
Oh, yeah. That
So I got to change my illustration. This is how Bible study works. It's constantly changing as you get more information. So I had the wrong vessel here. I'm going to fix the illustration. So, as this vessel was waved, it was waved in all 4 directions. It was tenufed up and down, and then back and forth, with it up over his head. Back and forth. There's a lot of reasons for it. I won't go into it.
Yeah, imagine.
Kind of like the lulav, yes, of Sukkot. But it was important that they see it go back and forth and up and down. Make sense? So I've got the picture here. You can go back and forth, and then
Up and down.
up and forward at the same time. Up and down. Up and down. That is a tenuf.
It's like a church,
Yeah, it's kind of like the dance, the Cherkassia dance. That's right.
Robicide.
Yeah, in Israeli dance, it's what's they call Cherkassia. It's kind of like that. So that is a tenuf, and God wants that thing, that vessel, that Omer, to be that. He wants it tenufed. So that's the ascending and descending.
It's like a dance.
Yeah, it is like a dance.
Tradition.
It is like a dance, absolutely like a dance. But think about this. It said in Ephesians, he ascended and descended. Well, who's the one who ascended and descended? The one who ascended is also the one that descended. Therefore, he gave gifts to men. Make sense?
Yes.
So who's the Omer? Yeshua. Yeshua is the Omer. Remember, he's called the first fruits of the resurrection.
Right.
And the first fruits resurrection, Bikur, is the time that you do the tenuf. So he is the tenufah. He is the tenuf. And he's offered as a tenufah on first fruits, on Bikurim, so that he can give to every single believer a gift, whatever that gift is. Either, let's see if I can do it, reaping, threshing, winnowing, no, parching, yeah, you're right. Parching,
And
winnowing, or sifting. He ascended and descended. Why? So that each one of us can be given either being a reaper, not a grim reaper, a thresher, a burner, a parcher, roaster, a winnower, or a sifter. that make sense so far?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay? So let's look at this passage again. When you enter the land which I'm going to give you, and you reap its harvest, then you shall bring in the Omer. Who is that?
Yeshua.
It's Yeshua. Of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest, and he shall tenuf it. He shall tenuf that Omer. It shall go up and down before the Lord for you to be accepted. It goes up and down before the Lord. So there's got to be something in the Bible that says Yeshua went up and down before the Lord, ascended and descended, ascended and descended, more than once
Right.
before the Lord. And that's the trick, more than once. More than once. On the day after Shabbat, the priest shall tenuf it, shall wave it. And then you start counting the Omer. Count 50 days from the day after the Shabbat. And you were right. And there it is. So what's the ascent and descent? Grace was given according to the measure of Messiah's gift. Therefore it says, that's why it says, when he ascended on high, he led captive a host of captives. Now, please understand, nobody understands this first fruits and bikurim and tenuf and wave offering and counting of the Omer stuff having to do with Ephesians 4. Nobody. Nobody. Except the Jews. Some Jews who actually do this process of the offering and the Omer, they read Ephesians 4 and they're like, that makes sense. Christians have zero backstory to understand what this is talking about. Messianic Jews don't have any backstory to understand. Hebrew Christians don't. Nobody's got any backstory to know what this is talking about. But if you can see it, if you can see the backstory, it just opens up. And it's like, oh, that is so simple. It's so simple. Makes sense.
Yeah.
That's why it says, when he ascended on high, he led captive a host of captives, and he gave gifts to men. Why did he give gifts to men? Because grace was given according to the measure of Messiah's gift, whatever that means, which we'll talk about. Now, this expression, he ascended, well, what does it mean? Except that he descended too, to the lower parts of the earth. He who descended is himself also he who ascended far above the heavens. So it's setting up a pattern of God, of Yeshua going up and down, up and down, up and down, over and over again, so that he might fill all things. What was that?
How many times do you do that?
I believe it's 7, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I believe I came across something that said 7, but I don't know. I'm just going to say I don't know. So, where is this pattern of God going up and down and up and down? Genesis 28:12. When Jacob went to where? Where was Jacob when he saw the ladder going up to heaven? Where was he? Say it loud. Say it loud. Bethel? I can't understand what he's saying. Jerusalem. Bethel. It's called Bethel, house of God. You don't remember what it was called before that? Luz. Yeah, good. Luz. Luz, and then it was changed, had its name changed to Bethel, house of God, and it is the Temple Mount. And at the Temple Mount, Jacob saw a ladder ascending to heaven, and so he said, this is the house of God, the Beit Elohim, and the Sha'ar HaShamayim, the gate of heaven. The gate of heaven and the house of God. So it says, angels were ascending and descending on a ladder. Where were they going?
Heaven and back.
Where in heaven?
Temple?
Jerusalem. They were going from Jerusalem to Jerusalem. Jerusalem to Jerusalem. Jerusalem to Jerusalem. Jerusalem to Jerusalem. Jerusalem to Jerusalem.
As above, as below.
Yes, the Jerusalem above and the Jerusalem below, and they're directly above one another, and so the angels of God and Yeshua just goes up and down from Jerusalem to Jerusalem. That's why Jerusalem is a thing. It's not because Jerusalem's a thing. It's because it's directly below the Jerusalem above. And it's a picture of Jerusalem above, like it says in Psalm 48. That now think about this. It says it's a city that's in the far north. Jerusalem ain't in the far north of anything. not the world, not Jerusalem, not the Israel, not even Judah. It's not in the north of anything. And yet it says it's in the far north. Why? Because it's far north. It's high, it's up, it's high, it's Jerusalem above. Now I can't remember what Jerusalem below is called. Jerusalem above is Ma'alot. Jerusalem Hama'alot. Jerusalem the lifted up. Jerusalem the high. And Jerusalem below. Can't remember how that's written. So that's what the angels were ascending, and they were a Tenufah. The angels were a Tenufah, offering, like God offering, up and down, and up and down. And the ladder, I don't know if you can understand this, is Yeshua. The thing on which the messengers ascend and descend. Yeshua is the ladder. The thing that gets you up to Jerusalem above. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Kind of hard to follow, but that's a thing. Yes? Yes, he's the Dedek. He is the way. He is the path. All right, so you see these Jerusalem above, Jerusalem below, the angels going up and down, and then in Psalm 47. Let's go to Psalm 47. Not Psalm 48 about Jerusalem lifted up. Psalm 47, which is different. Verse 5. God has ascended with a shout, the Lord with the sound of a shofar. When? When did God ascend with a shout? When did God go up to heaven with a shout, with the sound of a shofar? When? No, say it.
Resurrection.
Our resurrection?
No.
Oh, Yeshua's resurrection? Nope.
I know that's an ascent.
Yes.
Okay, ask the question again.
Okay. It says, God has ascended with a shout, the Lord with the sound of a shofar. When?
Oh,
Not Shavuot?
in the Feast of the Trumpets.
That hasn't happened yet. Shavuot, Feast of Trumpets at our resurrection hasn't happened yet. It says it past tense. When did it happen?
The Omer?
Well, it has to be in the
No, not Genesis 1.
The first Shavuot. Moshe.
Say it louder.
The first Shavuot with Moshe.
Yes, it's Shavuot. What we're used to is thinking God descended with the fire and the furnace and the wind and the rain and the hail, and he comes down with fire and smoke, right? He descends as a furnace. He also
On
ascended.
TV.
Right, because you didn't stay down here.
Yes, he didn't stay down here. And by the way, he did it 7 times.
Yeah,
From Shavuot to Yom Kippur.
right.
Up and down, and up and down, and up and down. All you have to do is read the passages in Exodus and Deuteronomy. It tells you he went up, he went down, he went up, he went down, he went up, he went down. And every time he did it, there was what sound? 2 sounds? Shofar and a shout. Okay. In Acts chapter 1, verse 11, look at this. This is when Yeshua ascends. You were close when you talked about the resurrection. It's not the resurrection. It's when he ascended. We're looking for the word ascend and descend, right? Yes. Acts 1:11. I'm not sure what you're saying.
Is that on the next slide?
I'm sorry?
That's not in the slide.
What?
The slide. Is the slide go to the next slide?
She said it's on the next slide.
Okay.
Acts 1:11.
Right there.
They also said, Men of Galilee, why do you stand gaping up into the sky? Oh my God. That's what they look like. This Yeshua, who has been taken up from you into heaven, ascended into heaven, will come in exactly the same way as he as he left. How did he go? Wait. Let's back up. How is he coming? What are we going to hear? A shout and a shofar. He's left the same way he's coming.
Right.
So therefore, he ascended with a shout and the sound of a shofar. See what I'm saying? It's a pattern that God set. It doesn't say in here in Acts that they heard a loud shofar and a shout, but that's what happened. He's going to come back the same way he left, which is, wake up! Whatever. There you go. It's going to be the same coming as going. That's a tenufah. Up and down, and up and down. 7 times. Well, I told you, don't quote me on that. Up and down, and up and down. Maybe. Go to Proverbs chapter 30. Proverbs 30 verse 4. Who has ascended into heaven and descended?
Yeshua.
Now, how come Paul didn't quote this when he's giving gifts? Because it doesn't say in this passage about giving gifts. It says it in Psalm 47. Or was it 46? Who has ascended into heaven and descended? Who has gathered the wind in his fist? Who has wrapped the waters in his garment? Who has established all the ends of the earth? What is his name and his son's name? When I read this before I was a believer, I went like this. No way. No way. That is bull. They put that in there. I hate this. I didn't go, wow, that's amazing. I'm going to believe in Yeshua. I got mad. And somebody rewrote this.
That can't be the original text.
Can't believe it. That can't be in the Jewish Bible. So I went and checked it in the Jewish Bible, knowing that it doesn't say that, and of course it says that.
Of course it's right there.
What is his name and his son's name? So this tells us two things. This tells us, number one, that God ascends and descends. And that God has a son, which Jews don't believe. And here it is in Proverbs. How about them apples? Maybe. You like apples? Okay.
I love apples.
I like green ones.
Yep.
Now, what do they have to do with each other? What's the first concept? The measure.
Right.
What is the measure?
Omar.
What is the measure?
Omer.
1 Omer. And the second concept is ascending and descending. What do they have to do with each other? But to each one of us a gift. Now this is the word charis, like charismatic. That's the word charismatic is from this Greek word charis, which means grace, or graciousness, or gift, or favor, or liberality. It means all these things. So you could translate it as, but to each one of us a gift was given. Or you could translate it as to each of us graciousness was given. Either one is fine. But to each one of us a gift was given, according to the measure of Messiah's. Now when it says in the English, it's translated, how's it translated? Is grace, according to Messiah's grace. Is that what it says? I forgot. According to Messiah's grace. Well, this is the word Dorian in Greek, which means gratuitously, freely, for nothing. That's all it means. It's not the word gift. So the Greek translation, or the English translation, sorry, I want to go back to it because I can't remember how it says
In
it.
Ephesians?
In Ephesians, yeah. Grace was given according to the measure of Messiah's gift. That's not a good translation.
Right.
It should be switched around. It should be a gift was given according to the measure of Messiah's grace or liberality or giving. Does that make sense? It's not the same word in Greek. One is charis, one is Dorian.
Yeah, it says grace.
And they switched them around, basically. They switched them around, basically. I mean, it's not a horrible translation. This is not good. A gift was given according to the measure of Messiah's graciousness or freely giving. So I've retranslated it. Isn't that nice of me? I've retranslated it like I know something as grace to each one of us, a gift was given according to the measure of Messiah's freely giving. Now that's good translation from what I can tell. And that makes a heck of a lot more sense. He ascended and descended so that he could give gifts to men. Right?
Yes.
Yep.
So, to each of us, a gift was given. Therefore, it says, that's why it says, when he ascended on high, he led captive a host of captives, and he gave gifts to men. Why does it say he gave gifts to men? Because to every believer, God has set apart from his ascent and descent as a Tenufah, he set apart one of the 5 gifts. Now, I wish Paul had just come right out and said that. But remember who his audience is. Jews who know Judaism.
Right.
So, it's kind of like a book, a nuclear fission for dummies. Building a nuclear reactor for dummies. You don't do that. You don't have to give all the backstory. So he didn't do it. Therefore it says, when he ascended on high, he led captive a host of captives and gave gifts to men. Now this expression, he ascended, what does it mean that he descended also to the lower parts of the earth? He who descended is himself also he who ascended. Now in my opinion, here he's quoting Proverbs 30. Who is ascended but he who descended? What is his name? What is his son's name? I believe that's what he's quoting here. He also descended into the lower parts of the earth. He who descended is himself the one who ascended far above all the heavens, so that he might fill everything. So that he might what? All things?
Fill.
Might what?
Fill. Just like an Omer.
Right. He might also fill all things.
Fill all things.
What is this title of these 50 days?
Fill.
Filling the measure. Filling the measure.
Filling all things the way I don't know, this is the way I understand it, and some other studies that I have heard and done, heard, and that is, just like it says reaping, threshing, parching, winnowing, and shifting, and each individual, like the evangelist, the pastor, the prophet, the teacher, and the apostle, each of them have they're doing something to the wheat, but what it says, the wheat and the chaff will be separated, and it's actually representing really people. He says that those people, it's the wheat and the chaff, which is actually representing, and when the full measure has been measured, God is measuring the people, and it says, and time, he says there's time, and so, and it's measuring, it's filling up, like he's coming back to the earth to reap back his harvest, and those are actually, and each one is doing something, evangelist, to reap that harvest.
I think he wants to teach.
All right. There's no way I'm gonna get all that on the video. It's too much. I
TMI?
can't do it. I can't do it.
But do you understand?
Yeah, I do. That's all on TV.
Let's get back to where we were.
Okay.
So that he might fill all things. What's the title of this time period? Filling the measure. How many days is the measure filled?
50.
How many weeks? 7. 7 weeks. Filling the measure for 7 weeks. What is the measure?
Omer.
1 Omer.
One person.
1 person. The grain, the Omer, is a human. And he who descended is himself also he who ascended far above all the heavens, so that he might fill the measure, fill all things. So he gave some as apostles, some as prophets, some as evangelists, some as pastors and teachers. Why? For the equipping of the holy ones for the work of service, to the building up of the body, the Omer, the filling up of the Omer, the body of Messiah, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a perfect man. That's what it says in Greek. It's the same word in Hebrew that is tamim, meaning perfect. To a perfect man. Now, what does that perfect have to do with counting the Omer?
Well, by the time they take you through all that.
No. What does perfect have to do with the counting of the Omer?
Well,
Did you forget already?
The flowers got to be perfect.
It's
Nope.
happening, it's happening in the heavens.
No.
Tom.
You forgot.
Yeah,
You forgot.
okay.
The sifting.
You forgot. Oh, there it is.
The sifting.
What are the Sabbaths called? Seven.
Oh yeah, you said 7 perfect Sabbaths.
Perfect. Tamim. Shabbatot Tamim. Shabbatot Tamim.
Yeah.
Perfect Sabbaths. You fill the measure for 7 Sabbaths, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes? And they have to be perfect Sabbaths. In other words, complete. It's filling this thing over a time period until it's full.
And you said the perfect man, right?
Well,
So,
until it's perfect. Let's read that again. I know there's a lot of words here. Paul got really wordy, but we're supposed to know what it means. And of the knowledge of the Son of God to a perfect man. That said perfect Sabbath. This says a perfect man. They're filling the Omer for 7 Sabbaths. Therefore, the Omer equals what?
Yeshua.
Oh my goodness. It says, filling it up to a perfect man. God said 7 perfect Sabbaths, or 49 days of filling the Omer, till it's perfect. Therefore, the Omer equals what?
One man.
A man. One man. Right.
I said that.
One man. I didn't hear you.
Which is
Good.
One man.
We are the
We're not so man equals Omer. I got a whole chapter in my book on counting of the Omer, in my big book, that goes into all the verses. Can't do it right now. Goes into all the verses that proves that in the Bible, 1 Omer equals 1 human being. There's a lot of them. Can't do it right now.
One word,
so
Say
what
it
do you,
again.
one word. Does it have to do with Yeshua?
No.
so what do you mean by perfect
Okay.
Sabbath as opposed to regular Sabbath?
I can't hear you.
What do you mean by perfect Sabbath as opposed to regular Sabbath?
Has to be full, has to be complete, has to be perfect. Because, all right, if you want to know,
The Sabbath?
okay, we'll go back.
Why is it perfect?
Why is the Shabbat perfect? What makes it perfect? Right? That's your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Go back to the beginning. There's your answer. So, in a sense, you are correct, Hannah. You shall also count to you from the day after Shabbat 7 perfect Sabbaths. Who do you count it to?
Yourself.
What does that mean? You count the Omer, you fill it up, you make it perfect for 7 weeks. What does that mean, count it to you? Does that mean today is the 27th day of the Omer? Big
Yeah.
deal.
You're counting
Right.
it, when it says you're counting it to you, is you're dealing with you.
Yes, that's what it means. It means you deal with you. Now, when the Jews have taken this and just expanded it into a whole book on the 49 days, the 7 weeks, and each day of each week is another attribute that you're supposed to work on yourself. That is way too much for me to handle. I can handle maybe 2 in a 50-day period. Maybe God dealing with me about maybe two things to work on. Maybe. And that's not a good counting of the Omer. But I'm lazy too. But that's what it's talking about, is perfecting yourself during these 70 weeks. I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about ascending and descending and filling the measure.
Because you're perfecting yourself.
Because you're perfecting yourself.
Yeah.
Theoretically, you don't have to do it. You can do it if you want. Some people are better at it than others. But that's what the time period is for. But you can't do that unless you know the gifts for this time period. So I'm just going to talk very, very briefly about the gifts. Most of you know what your gift is. A couple of you don't. So here's how I read it. because he ascended and descended as a Tenufah, he gave gifts to who? All. Remember, he said, but to each of us, to each one of us. And most of the believers in the body of Messiah, miss this. They don't believe this. Oh, well, he's a pastor. He gets paid. That guy's an evangelist. He goes around the country. He makes money being an evangelist. Oh, that guy's a teacher. That girl's a teacher. She gets paid. She makes money teaching. She teaches in churches. She's a teacher. Where's the apostles?
Right?
Where's the prophet? You get paid for being a prophet? But the truth is this, and this is from Judaism, not from Christianity. It's from Judaism. The Jews believe, still to this day, the ones who really know the Bible and do the Bible and care about the Spirit of God, that there are evangelists, Jewish evangelists. They believe that there are Jewish rowing pastors. It's a shepherd in Hebrew. They believe that there are Jewish prophets today. They believe that there are Jewish teachers today. Not rabbis, teachers. It's a different word. It's the word moreh, not the word rabbi. And they believe that today there are Jewish apostles, shlachim. Every congregation is supposed to have a shaliach. So here's what they are in Hebrew. This is where we're going to end, because I'm not going to go into the gifts. You got to start this study on your own if you don't know it. The one who reaps, who goes out into the field and cuts down that initial Omer, that initial sheaf of wheat, is the evangelist. They're created for this purpose. They can walk into a group of people, doesn't matter who they are, talk about refrigerators, and people get born again. I've seen it happen. They talk about what they ate last night. People get born again. They talk about nothing, the stupidest, most inane, innocuous stuff, and people get born again. Because that's what they were created for. They're good at it. The threshing, this is the tough one. This is the one that nobody knows. It sounds bad, right? You take that grain into the temple, to the house of God, and the very first thing that happens to it is, oh, that's the apostle, that's the mean one, that's the prophet who opens their mouth and they start beating on you. No, that's the pastor. The pastor is a shepherd. And the very, very first thing that happens once somebody is brought into the house is they're befriended. The word roe means friend. It's the same word as Ruth. You know the woman Ruth in the Bible? Her name means friend, Ruth. It's the same root as, I don't get it, the same root word as roe.
Thank you, sir.
Friend
May I have
or
another?
shepherd. It's a shepherd.
Psalm 23, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. He's talking about
Right.
a shepherd.
Right. It's in Psalm 23 is where I was going to go. In Psalm 23 it says, your rod and your staff beat me? No, comfort me.
Thank you, sir. May
The
I have
Lord is
another?
my shepherd. And it's the very first thing it says about it. So the beat, and remember what the rabbis said about beating the grain. Why did they use canes?
So they wouldn't bruise the wheat.
Right, so it wouldn't bruise the grain. It's not threshed normally, like normal threshing. It's threshed different in a different way. Because it's now in the house of God. It has to be treated differently. It has to be treated, it has to be beaten. But it has to be beaten in a way where it doesn't hurt them, it doesn't destroy them.
Gentle.
It's gentle. I don't even want to use that word.
Yeah.
Because it's not gentle. They're still beating on it. But they're beating it with a different tool that doesn't hurt them, doesn't bruise them.
Passionately?
This is not my gift. This is not my gift.
No.
For the first time in my life, from the age of 55, I'm finally starting to be able to do this a little tiny bit.
Not my
But I am not by any means a pastor, a shepherd. And I know that, so I'm happy with that.
So I can't call you rabbi?
It's not a rabbi is not a pastor.
It's not a teacher.
Rabbi means my high one. My high one.
He is a rabbi, he's not a pastor.
Hold
They're
on.
not the same.
Hold on. Rabbi in Hebrew means my high one. Rav. High. Ravi.
This Bible means teacher.
It's not teacher.
In this
The-
Bible. So
It's not.
listen to-
Hold on. I'm trying to explain. I'm trying to answer your question, but you're not letting me answer it. The reason people think rabbi means teacher is because of the New Testament, because John chapter 1. There's a mistranslation in there. It says, teacher, they talk to John.
Right.
John the Immerser, John the Baptist, wasn't a caveman. He was a rabbi. And they're talking to him and they say, Rabbi, is he the Messiah? And it says, Rabbi, which means, translated means teacher. It does not mean teacher. It means teacher. It's the idea, concept, and lifestyle of a teacher, of your teacher. It does not mean teacher. It means my high one. My high one, the one who I respect more than anybody on this planet, even more than my parents, is my rabbi, my high one.
Yeah, got it.
But because it's talking to Jews who know Judaism, it says, which means teacher. And all the Jews go, yeah, that's right.
Well, I understood
He's
because
my
the rabbis,
teacher.
they teach.
But it means the concept and lifestyle of my teacher. It does not mean teacher. Different word. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's the pastor, the shepherd, the friend, the person who can befriend people. Not my strong suit. Parching. Then it goes into the vessel that's perforated, and the fire touches every single grain. You know who that is.
I believe that's the hardest one.
Who's that?
It's a prophet.
That's the prophet. They open their mouth and fire comes out. And they can say it as nice as they want to say it. It doesn't matter. It still burns. It doesn't matter how nice they say it. Well, I just want to let you know that, I had a dream and I saw you having sex with that girl down the street. And then fire came from heaven and burned you up and killed you. Just want to let you know. It doesn't matter how they say it. It's fire. And that's the prophet. But notice that the rabbi said, that the sages said, the fire has to touch who? I mean, what?
Every grain.
Every single grain. Every single grain. You who are prophets, do not keep your mouth shut. If you keep your mouth shut, God can't get the fire to touch the grain. And that's your fault. You got to open your mouth. And then say it nice if you want to say it nice, but it's going to burn. Winnowing. This is the teacher. They would have a big fork. It's called a winnowing fan or a winnowing fork, and they'd shovel the grain, throw it up in the air. And it's already been threshed, so the chaff and the wheat or barley has now come apart.
Separated.
And it's thrown up in the air together, and then the wind blows away the chaff, and the good grain drops. Yes.
A good example of one of those instruments. See an old Frankenstein movie. Not a pitchfork, but you actually see that one.
Yes, that's right. The old Frankenstein movies. That's right. They go after the monster
Right.
with
Torches, pitchforks.
torches and these winnowing forks. They've got 3 prongs. That's right. So this is the teacher. The teacher is able to separate.
You remember.
Now listen. The teacher is able to separate between good doctrine and bad doctrine.
And it's the wind, the Holy Spirit.
And it's the
that
wind,
separates.
right? It's the wind of the Holy Spirit that separates the doctrine. And by the way, that's in this passage in Ephesians. If you read a few more verses, it talks about, we're going to be built up into a perfect Omer, a perfect man. Why? So that we're not tossed around by every wind of doctrine. So that's the wind. There's good doctrine, there's bad doctrine. It's seen as wind. A lot of verses about that, by the way. So that's the teacher. They're really, really good at separating things. I can't do it. I'm not a teacher. I am not a teacher. I know I'm not a teacher. Daniel's a teacher. He walks around with that back belt on with all his accoutrement and his highlighters and pencils and pens and you know, he's got pointers and he's got the tools of the trade of a teacher. And at any time, day or night, he could be asleep. Hey, what were you dreaming about? I saw all these letters recombining in Hebrew, and they formed this, and that's 413 in Gematria in Hebrew. That's the number, which is the same number as Leviticus 24:7, which said, I'm like, where are you coming up with this stuff? He's a teacher. It's magic. It's a magical gift. Actually, all of them are magical. They're really, really amazing. Like the pastor, they can magically feel what people feel. I don't feel nothing when I'm around people, unless I look in their eyes. But like Becca, she can just get around people and feel what they're feeling because she's a pastor. It's like she just immediately becomes their friend. Oh, hear me, help you. You know, she feels it. That's why she's a social worker. So the prophet, you already know how mystical and weird that is. It's magical. But the teacher's got a magical, amazing gift. It ain't me. I don't have this gift. I gotta dig and look, and I really work really, really hard to find anything because I'm not very smart. I'm an apostle, and I know I'm an apostle. The apostle is, I get excited, by the way, every time I say the word apostle. Something inside me goes, yeah. I get all excited, I'm like, yeah, I get to be, oh God, what am I thinking? Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that.
Right.
Nobody wants to be sifted through 13 sieves. Everybody hates it. Why did you say that? No, you're wrong. This is the Hebrew. The Hebrew says it like this. Don't say Christ. Don't say Christ. Christ means Messiah. Messiah is from Hebrew, Mashiach, but Christ is from the Greek, but it means the same thing. So why are you saying Christ? Every time you say it, and on and on and on and on it goes. And it never stops. This constant sifting and sifting and sifting until it gets more and more and more and more perfect. Nobody likes being around an apostle. You know, people think that the prophet's the tough one. Apostle's the tough one. And this has been the bane of my existence. The bane of everybody around me's existence for, you know, my entire believing life. Because from the day I got born again, I started doing this. I started sifting. Somebody would say something. I didn't know anything, but I did read this one thing. And somebody who's been a believer 20 years, and I've been a believer a week. And somebody will say something. Somebody said something. And I go, no. It means this. This is the Hebrew. It says this, and this is what it means. Don't say that. And I would just trounce them. I'd just beat them up. And I think I'm just, let's make that a little better. Let's clean that up. That's all I'm trying to do. But I didn't know how to do it in a nice way. Nor did I care to do it in a nice way.
Ditto.
Didn't even care. So in the last maybe 10 years, I've been getting better at it. And you just said something really, really key. The apostle has to have a pastor with him. But the Bible never links apostle and pastor together. Who does it link with the apostle? Every time.
Prophets.
Right, prophets. And the reason is prophets can see, like a horse, you know how a horse is above, way high up over everything, got a long neck, you can see high, and its eyes are way out here, and they're huge. And they see everything way in the distance, so they know where to go. The apostle ain't like that. The apostle just deals with the here and now, the little problems, fixing all the little things that need to be cleaned up. So apostles get our head locked into right now, and they can't see what's down there. That's why the apostle has to be linked up with the prophet. And it's always been like that. Because remember, Yeshua said in Matthew, I sent you, the Holy Spirit sent you apostles and prophets to you, Israel, and you didn't listen. Well, when did he send apostles and prophets? And they didn't listen in the Old Testament. So this is nothing new. This has been going on forever. So, number one, you got to figure out what your gift is. That's the most important thing. Number two, you got to start using your gift. You got to start playing with it, practicing with it, screwing up with it. I'm very serious. Make mistakes.
How you learn.
That's the only way you're going to learn. I guarantee you. If you think you cannot make a mistake with your gift, you're in for a world of hurt. Because you're going to make mistakes. And this is one of the big differences between Judaism and Christianity. In Christianity, there's no room for error. Thus saith the Lord. And if somebody says something really stupid, and everybody goes, that person's a false prophet. Not in Judaism. In Judaism, we go like this. I'm not so sure. Doesn't it say in? And they try to fix it, figure it out, you know. We're not intimidated by, thus says the Lord. We're not intimidated by that. We're like, yeah, maybe not. So there's a lot of room for error, and I guarantee you, you're going to make mistakes. So you're going to have to be patient with yourself. Remember, I'm talking about the gifts as God gave them in Judaism.
Right.
I'm not talking about, well, I know I'm a prophet, and in the church I'm accepted as a prophet. Who cares? Who cares? You've never done it in Judaism. It's a whole different ballgame. Because the prophet has to be submitted to the prophets. And the apostles have to be submitted to the prophets. And the teachers have to be submitted to the pastors. And the apostles need to be submitted to the pastors. And the pastors need to be submitted to the teachers and the apostles and the prophets. And everybody has to work together. So there's a lot of pushing and shoving and trying and making mistakes and working it out and stuff like that. Get what I'm saying?
Cool.
So figure out what your gift is, especially now during the time of the Omer. And start figuring out how to use it. Start researching the words that are particular to your gift. Now that you know what the processes are, like you evangelists, start looking for all the verses about reaping and cutting down and bringing people to the house and stuff like that. You who are pastors, start looking for verses about threshing, about beating, about befriending, about anything that has to do with the shepherd. Look up verses, those of you who are prophets, probably don't need to tell you what to look up. Because there's a lot of verses about prophets and fire. And then you teachers, if you're a teacher, start looking up about wind of doctrine. Separating between good and bad. Wind of doctrine. Good doctrine, bad doctrine. And there's a bunch of verses about winnowing itself. And then, if you're an apostle, start looking up verses about separation, sifting, refining,
Yes.
perfecting.
Yes.
Okay? Yes.
When you were talking,
If you're going to talk.
okay, when you were talking about the 13 sieves, instantly I thought about the 13 principles of faith in Judaism that Maimonides had written about on his commentary in the Mishnah. And the 13, and I just thought, oh, this is amazing, because, you know, as they're sifting, as apostles sift, the first one is, I believe in perfect faith in the Messiah, and, you know, you go through each of the steps. Well, the first one is the existence of God. The second sieve, you could say, is God's unity and indivisibility into elements. The third, God's spirituality and
Incorporeality.
There it is.
He has no body.
Yeah, there's no God. His God, and then fourth, God's eternity. 5, God alone should be the object of worship. And as I'm reading all of these, and you should probably look it up on your own, by yourself. Number 6, revelation through God's prophets. Number 7, that preeminence of Moses among the prophets. Number 8, that the entire Torah, both the written and the oral law, are of divine origin and were dictated to Moses by God on Mount Sinai. Number 9, the Torah given by Moses is permanent and will not be replaced or changed. Number 10, the awareness of all human actions and thoughts, that introspection that we should all be doing. Number 11, reward of good and punishment of evil. Number 12, the coming of the Jewish Messiah. Number 13, the resurrection of the dead. And what I saw was, as an apostle, each of the sieves is basically doing that. It is refining each and every one of us so that all of those things are dealt, within us, so that we become that perfect flower that God can reach into us, and nothing's going to stick. It's just going to be just a pure, fine flower. Perfect. Tom.
That's what I was gonna say, exactly what she said, is
Okay.
that,
She
is that
covered it.
the apostle actually touches every one of the 5.
No, the apostle does not touch every one of those 5. Not true.
But a small.
That's a bad doctrine from Christianity. The apostle is completely and totally different from the other 4. Totally different. It's a shaliach, which means sent one in Hebrew, which means you get from point A to point B. It's the same word as a spear or an arrow. You get from point A to point B. That's all we're good at. I can move a million people from point A to point B. I might destroy them in the process because I'm an idiot, but I can do it. I can feel it. I know what to do. I know how to get them from here to here. Totally different from the other gifts. One has nothing to do with the other. And remember, the rabbis, the sages said, that process is done, then that process, then that process, then that process. They're completely different. The church, for some reason, I don't know, somebody came up with it. They said the apostles like over the other ones. Not true at all. Look where it is on the list. Look where it is on the list. Where is it on the list? Last. That's what Paul said. We are last of all. We are the apostles last of all. We're in the back. We're at the bottom of the ladder. Why? Because it's the last process done. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry?
You need all 5 operating together.
Did you start your sentence with what? Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course you need all 5 operating. That's why I'm telling you to figure out what your gift is.
Right.
And start playing with it. Start working with it. Start doing it. Start making mistakes with it. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, something I noticed, probably just a little piece of worthless, meaningless trivia, how to get the saying, oh, you're bleeding like a sieve. A sieve at the last one keeps going and pouring the finer flour. You're bleeding like
Of
a
course.
sieve.
And in the sieve, the good stuff drops through.
Yeah.
What happens with the bad stuff? Where does it end up?
I don't know.
In the sieve. You know that amongst pagans that live in South America, Africa, Borneo, islands, can't remember what they're called, the islands, Southeast Islands or whatever. Pacific Islanders, yeah, Pacific Islands. So you know they have, you know what their priest is called? A sin eater. They call them sin eaters.
Oh, yeah, right.
Because they're smart. They're watching the guys, or girls, sometimes the female. Their shaman helps the person, but takes the sin into them. And then spits it out, or whatever they do. They drink booze and spit it out, or whatever. All different kind of processes. But that's how it works. The priest, in this sense, an apostle, shakes that garbage out of you. And they end up with it. And they know how to get rid of it. So when we get into an argument, you guys, when you and I get into an argument, I'm not going to open my mouth unless I know what I'm talking about. I'm going to win the argument. I'm going to take that grain of garbage from you, clean up your doctrine, clean up your words. I know what to do with it. I know how to get rid of it. I know how to use my gift. At least, I know how to use my gift better and better. I should say it that way. I know how to use it better and better all the time. Still not real good at it, but I'm better at it. Because I've been practicing it. So that's really all I want to say today. So we need to pray because this is a big, big concept. It could be for you, I hope it's for you, a real life-changing body of knowledge that you can use and you can really take it and run with it. That's what I'm hoping. I hope every one of you take it and run with it. And start coming and telling me, guess what I found out about my gift? Fantastic. Do it. Let's pray. Abba, thank you that you ascended and descended. You went up and down, up and down, up and down. You come to earth to deliver gifts so that we can be like Yeshua. We can be an Omer, just like Yeshua is an Omer. And we can refine each other and beat each other and burn each other and reap other people to bring them in. And we can separate bad doctrines from each other to refine the Omer, to create a perfect Omer for perfect time period that you've set apart from first fruits to first fruits, from Bikurim to Shavuot. And Lord, I ask that you would, by your Spirit, that you would help tear away out of us the ridiculous doctrines that we have inside our minds that somebody put in there and we believed it. Because we heard it, it was unproven, but we believed it. And I ask that you would help us to learn what Judaism teaches, what your Torah teaches about your gifts, so that we can reshuffle our thinking and get our hearts right, so that our heart and our mind can match your Torah. Lord, I ask that you would teach us by your Spirit, that you would be our teacher, our moreh, that you would be our moreh, that you would teach us, and you would shepherd us, and you would sift us like an apostle, because you were the sent one, you were the apostle sent to the world, and you're our friend, our shepherd. You are our shepherd, Abba. And I thank you for evangelizing us through Judaism. That Zion is lifted up in the mountain and evangelizes to the whole world. And I ask that you would do that inside of us, Lord, in our minds and our hearts. In the name of Yeshua. Amen. You're welcome. Let's do Kiddush.